Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cyclocross Social Podcast. Today we're going to be discussing a full day of racing at the European Championships because due to the storm on Saturday, all racing got moved to Sunday, and with me to discuss that is Issam.
Yes, thank you for having me.
I am coming to you from the back of a campervan. I am on my way to Finland, so my audio quality will definitely be different than from usual, but hopefully it is the best that I can do. Well, it definitely is the best that I can do now. Let's start by talking about the men's elite race. The weather conditions completely changed to what was forecasted, and with that, all our forecasts could go into the bin as well. It was raining, torrential rain, super bad weather, but that did not stop Paul Sauser from immediately playing the team game in the first part of the race. After Zweek had the best start in the first lap, Vanthourenhout opened the gap in the second because Issam dropped the gap. He had 10 seconds, there was no real organization in the chase, and once that was there, led by Joris Nieuwenhuis had a puncture which moved Issam into second, allowing Issam to create an even larger gap. The gap went up to almost 25 seconds once Cameron Mason hit the front of the chasing group. The gap came down to 15 seconds, but it stabilized around there. Mason was there with Ron Haar and Issam. Thibaut Nys was dropped from there. As Nys was dropped, it was Van der Haar, the teammate of Ron Haar, who closed that gap. We had 4 chasers, and they were 20 seconds down. Van der Haar tried to bridge that gap, but crashed once he was in a pretty promising position to actually close that gap. From there on, Vanthourenhout could basically yo-yo his gap and secure victory. The gap went to 15 seconds, back to 20, and in the end, he took his second European title. The second place went to Cameron Mason. Initially, Van der Haar had ridden away in that battle for second, but he crashed. Mason overtook Van der Haar and then took that silver medal. Van der Haar managed to outsprint Ron Haar for third place in a sprint in which both riders lost their pedal. Issam was knocked out of that battle with a puncture. It was a bit of a weird race, Issam. The riders that we had expected at the front, the Nys, man of the season maybe so far, Issam, Kuipers, all these riders, they weren't really there today, and Vanthourenhout, a rider who has been inconsistent this season, was there. He delivered on the day that it mattered the most so far. Do you think that this is a perfect peak by Vanthourenhout, that he benefited of the conditions, or that the rest simply just paid the price for the Koppenberg? I'm interested to hear your takes on it.
Well, I mean, it definitely wasn't the race that we expected to see, but I think that we, had mentioned at least that it is a championship. So in the end, in a way, you have to take all the races that have been before the championship into account. But at the end, it is also a race that some have peaked to and have sacrificed everything for it. And I don't think that Vanthourenhout really did that, but it's very difficult to really grasp what happened completely. I think you can definitely use the Koppenberg as a factor in the race of today. It was very tough, like we have said, one of the hardest editions, I would say, and that could have played a role in the racing that we have seen. I think that Vanthourenhout in the first laps got that gap, which I wouldn't say was a free gap because he had to work for it to get that gap, but he definitely got a lot of support from the Belgian team and, mostly in particular Issam. And that it hats off to him because I think that, Vanthourenhout has done a lot for him the other way around and has always tried to be the model teammate in a way. And now Issam did the opposite and showed that he could also be helping him out in crucial phases of a race, and that was definitely what happened. And when he got that gap, it's difficult then to organize a chase. The circumstances were tough with the mud, despite the fact that I think that if any other circuit track that we race on would be hit with this amount of rain, would have been a complete mudfest. It was still a mudfest in a way, but it was not to that extent. Say it was very tricky, but still kind of fast, and the corners were very difficult to go through. Some of those puddles where a lot of standing water was as well, and yeah, I mean, in the end, I think that Vanthourenhout, played it well, and then the longer the race went, you were like, okay, now where's Nys? Oh, Nys was nowhere. Iserbyt, well, didn't really look like he had the best of days. Van der Haar was there almost, he was closing up big time and then made a mistake. And then it was up to him again to regroup himself and go back in the chase. And then it is up to a guy like Cameron Mason that we know is, at the moment at least, not as good as Vanthourenhout. So it would be very difficult. And it's up to guys like Ronhaar, who today had a fantastic day if you compare it to the rest of the season so far. I think that by far his best day of the season. So yeah, it was a very I would say weird race, because we definitely didn't expect such a result and such a way of how the race would play out. But it was entertaining to watch and very fun to see.
Yeah, so I would also say it's a combination of all those factors. You say Mason is not as strong as Vanthourenhout. I will have to conclude today that they were on par. Mason needed to start way back, was one of the last riders to go into the field, needed to move through the field, spent quite a lot of energy doing that, only hit the front in the third lap, then managed to stay roughly on par with Vanthourenhout. I would say that it was a strong ride by Mason, and both Mason and Vanthourenhout really benefited of these conditions. I still stand by what I said in the preview about the course. It was not a super slow race, but it was a lot slower, a lot more technical, and a lot harder than if it had been the conditions that they had in the morning. This is also just a general comment. I mean, the predictions were wrong, and that's completely fine, but the part of what makes predicting cyclocross so difficult, especially when we record on Tuesdays and the racing is on Sunday, you don't know what the weather will do, and it's such an important factor. A rider like Vanthourenhout and Mason, they just have a better technique and come to the front. They flourish in these conditions. Vanthourenhout, as you say, was strong, but he will need to send a big thank you gift basket to Iserbyt, because he gets 20 seconds, and those 20 seconds are vital for the rest of the race. Another vital part is the mistakes of Lars van der Haar, mainly the mistake. Van der Haar is at some point pretty close to closing the gap, helped by Ronhaar. Ronhaar really launched him to do that. But then he makes a mistake just before what is the hardest section of the course. Before the barriers, there was this off-camera corner. It's a shame we couldn't properly see it on the broadcast, but Van der Haar missed a rut there. Super slippery, crashes, game over. I think if he doesn't crash there, he's going to close that gap, because he was quite frankly flying. He had closed the gap from 22 to 12 seconds in that gap, or in that lap. So I would say, if Van der Haar doesn't make that mistake, he probably comes back, we get a different race. But that's cross. We need to give Vanthourenhout the credits and the props for not making those mistakes. Maybe that was because he had that margin, that he could take slightly less risks. But we should also credit him for it. I think that was a pre-race plan set up by the Pauwelshuizen guys, Iserbyt and Vanthourenhout. They know Van der Haar is a rider who needs time to get into the race. They knew that Thibaut Nys was starting on the second row and would be further back. And what do you see? They take benefit from the fact that they are at the front. They play the country game, but surely also the commercial team game. And then from there on manage to dictate the race. And fair play to Vanthourenhout, 2 European titles in a row. And if you deliver a consistent race like this, I think it's not more than a well-deserved victory. And Vanthourenhout is not this rider that wins many races, but the wins that he gets do count. 2 European titles, a Belgian title, a couple of World Cup wins. If you look at his quality of his palmarès, it's very, very impressive. But would interested to hear your thoughts on Van der Haar and maybe just in general what was up with some of the other top favorites today, Iserbyt and Nys.
Like you said, I think a lot of props has to go to Vanthourenhout for completing. Was a gift in a way from Iserbyt, but then you have to finish it off. He had a very good day. He didn't have that dip that we have seen at the end of the race in a couple of races back. So yeah, he recovered well from the bad races and showed up today, and they executed the plan very well, which was something they had discussed before the race, as was said by Mette Penningen. Van der Haar didn't have the greatest of starts, and we have seen in some of the races that his start of the race is not the greatest, and then he has to get through the beginning phase to then get in a rhythm and get through the field, and that was exactly what kind of was happening. up until that mistake, which was on a very crucial moment, because I think that, that would have definitely changed the dynamic of the race. Ronhaar, as I've said before, surprised me big time. We know that he had it in him, but just the timing, I would say, was a bit surprising, to say the least, with the results that he had in the last couple of races. And with Nys, I'm starting to think, or at least that is the explanation that I kind of have at the moment, is that Koppenberg was just too much, in my opinion. I think that such an effort is just, for every person, for every rider, it is just, he can go with it a bit different, I would say, and can handle it a bit differently. And the effects of such a race are just differently, from rider to rider. It's a personal thing, I would say. And that was, kind of what I think happened with Nys, not having the best of days. That Koppenberg kind of, that was a hard race, so maybe that was also a little bit in the legs. And the circumstances weren't easy. It wasn't a fast race, a dry race where you might have, get a chance to get in the race and maybe race yourself into the race. That wasn't really the case. And I think, I don't know how you think about it, but that third place from Van der Haar in the end, where he, beat off Pim Ronhaar, I don't think that was necessary from Van der Haar, to be honest. I don't know how you think about it. Your teammates, it's your fellow countrymen. Ronhaar did so much in the race. I don't think Van der Haar needed that third place, in my opinion, but I don't know how you think about that.
A medal is a medal. I can understand both sides. As you say, Ronhaar did a lot of work, and we've said it, if Ronhaar maybe paces himself properly for once, he can get results himself, and today he did. It was nice to see him give an interview this week saying that he actually also thought himself and his coaching staff thought that he should calm down a bit more, and he did. But at the same time, there's a medal on the line. Van der Haar wanted to get something out of it, so I can definitely understand why he goes for it. It was pretty interesting to see both riders clip out of their pedal in that sprint, but Ronhaar was not the most surprising name for me. That was most definitely Cameron Mason. You mentioning riders who did well on the Koppenberg and some pay the price. I do think, if you look at Issam, of course he had that puncture at a very unfortunate moment. Thibaut Nys, as you said, these riders definitely will have felt the efforts from the Koppenberg. A couple of riders also said that in some of their interviews. But if you just look at riders who did not do the Koppenberg, Zweek, very weird race, was strong at the start, disappeared, no explanation. Kevin Kuhn, second championship in a row where he doesn't do that well. Gerben Kuipers didn't race the Koppenberg cross, ends 13th. Conditions were even better for him on a course that suits him well. There were some very weird things going on today, and where there's riders underperforming, there's also usually riders extremely overperforming, and that will definitely be Cameron Mason for me. Yes, he's been good this season, but I would say that this is an extra step on top of the level which he had already shown this year, to ride such a strong race, dictating the pace in the chase. That was very, very good by the Brit, who is keeps making progression. This is not a rider who was the biggest talent when he was a junior rider. He didn't race world championships as a junior. When he was a U23, he did get to race world championships, but still, until he was a last year U23, maybe a second year U23. In a second year U23, he was pretty good. He got that podium at the European Championships in Rosmalen. But really, as a last year U23, he made steps, and he keeps continuing to make big steps like this, and that is very promising to see. Yes, the course suited him. Yes, he lucked out in a way with the conditions which were not forecasted to be this, but it was a very strong race, second place, which he dedicated to his grandpa who passed away, which was also a very nice gesture to see. Let's look at the entire top 10 then. Vanthourenhout took his second European title ahead of Mason and Van der Haar, as said. We discussed the fourth place of Ronhaar. Ryan Kamp ended fifth ahead of Elie Iserbyt. Laurens Zweek was seventh ahead of Van der Putte, Orts and Wietse Meeuwse. Would also like to mention the fact that Joran Visure was carried out of the venue on a stretcher after he crashed in one of the more muddy corners. He looked to have injured his knee. We hope that he is doing well and won't miss too much of the competition. But back to the top 10, we don't really have an explanation for what was up with Zweek, Iserbiet, or from outside of the top 10, Kuipers and Kuhn. But what we do know was that Ryan Kamp rode a very strong race this summer. 5th place is also something which we didn't really expect from him here.
I think that was definitely also from him, for his side, a very, very good race. I mean, one thing we have to say about Iserbiet, there was one moment where he got a puncture. I don't know where it was. I think that was the moment when he dropped out because he was quite close to Ronhaar and Van der Haar at that moment. And then at that moment he had a puncture, had to get back, and then he was around with Kamp. There was that duo formed, and then they tried to bridge it back to Ronhaar. But I think that Kamp, very good race. I think that he I wouldn't say a lonely race, but he went through the field quite well. Was getting through it very well, and I think the circumstances as well helped him in this race. With some of the riders that normally on a good day should be ahead were not there, and then you have to get your chances, and he definitely did that, and it looked very good. I think what was, for me at least, the promising part out of the race of Kamp was that he didn't fade out at the end of the race. Also for him it was, I think maybe it had to do with the rain and everything, that's kind of everyone had that natural decline in the energy, but it was very nice to see that also someone that we know that has the talent and has the potential to be in the mix, to unlock it in a way and have this result, because these are the kind of results that 5th place is not something that you will hear for the rest of your life, but I think that that it is great to take with you in the future, and you can definitely build up on it, and I think an interesting part that was said in the Belgian broadcast is, for some riders right now, it's almost like we are hitting a second part, because this was a big goal, the European Championships, and now you kind of have to reset, program everything for the very busy month of December, which is going to be very important, and then you hit the nationals already, and then the championships, the World Championships. So yeah, it was a big race, and there was a lot at stake. And I think then if you are able to deliver and get a top 5, then you can be nothing but proud of yourself.
Yeah, as you said, it was weather for the real Flandrians van het veldrijden, the Flandrians of cyclocross, and the women also needed to face some extremely barbaric, heroic conditions. That didn't stop Alvarado from having the best start, but towards the end of the first lap, Van Empel managed to break away. For a while, the resistance of Alvarado seemed pretty fierce. She managed to stay within 5-6 seconds for about a lap, but then she faded a bit, and Van Empel really picked up the pace and took the win. Alvarado dropped back to a group with Inge van der Heijden, Annemarie Worst, and later Sarah Cassasola. Alvarado then managed to break away again from that group, which left the battle for third between van der Heijden and Cassasola. Van der Heijden led that for a while, managed to open a gap a couple of times, but towards the end of the race, Cassasola managed to overtake Van der Heijden and drop her, taking the third spot. Van Empel taking her second European title in a row as well, Issam. She said a bit that she had a lot of negative thoughts at the beginning of the race. I'm assuming that she referred to pressure, that she felt a lot of pressure at the beginning of the race and was struggling to deal with it, and once she could kind of let go of that, she managed to really pick up the pace and take the title. Nothing less than a super impressive, dominant ride by her, and she's taking a 2-week rest now.
Yeah, well deserved 2 weeks of rest, I would say. And yeah, I mean, it is hard for us to understand that pressure, I would say, because you look at the races, you look at the race today, and you're like, where do you find that pressure? Because it was again a demonstration of power and of the place that she's at that moment, the domination that she has over the other women. So I think that in that sense, I don't really understand it, and I think many people would not understand that pressure. But it's also, every time people expect you to perform at a certain level and expect you to just win.
Yeah, if I can break in there, because that's exactly it. The feeling that she must have had is that she can only lose. If she ends like second, like anything can go wrong. She can only lose here. So I think that is definitely something that plays an influence. Even if you win so many times, you feel like you can only lose, and that's something that I've never been in a position riding my bike that I was winning so much I could only lose. But even for me, when I was racing a national championship, I felt pressure that I put on myself because I wanted to perform as well as possible. So I definitely think that for her it was a feeling I can only lose. If something goes wrong, I'm going to be made a fool of, etc., etc.
Yeah, I mean, exactly that. I think that must be the feeling that kind of goes through your head. And I think that's even for us. I mean, if she would have lost today, we would have been talking about it for 30 minutes, I would say. It would be a big surprise, and we would be like, oh, yo, she lost. And every newspaper would have something about that loss. And, that is the results that she has put up the last couple of races this season, were just so good that you were like, well, she can't lose. I mean, luckily for her, she got over that quite quickly, and the first moment when she chooses to make a break for it, it was all said and done, and it was over before you know it, and the racing was over for first place. Alvarado, tried it a little bit, but kind of what we expected for first and second, I would say. I think that Alvarado came at her place, and eventually realized rather quickly that it was not going to be for first and it was going to be for second, and then you kind of just have to get yourself through the circumstances, through the race, and get that silver medal. And I think she did that perfectly. And then, third place. Your prediction was right, and mine was rather wrong, I would say. But Cassasola, not out of nowhere, but I think that you did a tremendous job on picking her for third, I would say.
Ladies and gentlemen, the prediction goat. Nah, who am I kidding? I can't speak too much. I mean, you win some, you lose some. The men's one was definitely way off, but yeah, it was good to see Cassasola come through the field, not only because I predicted her, also because it's nice to see a podium that isn't completely dominated by Dutch riders for once. And yeah, I could even see the Belgians get excited. Well, I say even the Belgians, but of course the Belgians are going to be excited because they were rather enjoying themselves that the Netherlands hadn't won any medals until the Women Elite race. But yeah, Cassasola with that third place, it was a pretty fair race. And like we said, the gaps on the women's side in terms of form and level are just a bit bigger than they are on the men's side. And you relatively need less there to create those gaps. So the gaps were pretty big, and then everybody here just came kind of where they belonged in terms of form. I do still want to come back to Van Empel. I want to circle back to that attack by her at the end of the first lap and the power that she could put out on that section towards the barriers every lap. When I see that, I again just think, please, Jumbo, send her to the road. And that's why I can't really understand what is going on there on the Jumbo women's team. A lot of riders are left. There was a lot of unhappiness about the management. But if I see or read what Jan Bove, her team manager or trainer, says in the newspapers, where he says, well, Van Empel, she's going to take a rest now, completely deserved. She can still win the World Cup, by the way, but that's another story. But when I hear her say, well, yeah, she will do all the X2O races, which means she will be continued racing after Worlds, then do a little bit of road, and then the mountain bike is calling again. I'm just thinking, please send her to Stade Bianchi. Haven't you seen what Puk Pietersen did there last year? Puk Pietersen was having a great race there, and Van Empel can do that too. So if anybody from Jumbo is listening to this, please stop focusing on that X2O trophy. Just race the rest of the World Cups, win the World Cup, or end second, because you can still very much win. It's going to be her against Pietersen still if they race all the remaining World Cups when they come back. And let go of that mountain bike, please. There's no point. She's not making the Paris selection. She can race Worlds, but please just do the Tour de France fun, do the classics, and I think she should be in to get some very great results there rather than I would almost say wasting time at the moment on the mountain bike. It's not something that will lead to nothing in the end, but I would love to see a bit more focus on the road, seeing the level and the acceleration that she has. If we look at the entire top 10, we had Van Empel, of course, with that win ahead of Alvarado and Cassasola. Van der Heijden was 4th, ahead of Aniek van Alphen. Ribeiro came through the field to 6th, ahead of Anna K. Then 2 Belgians, Kant and Verdonschot in 8 and 9, with Amandie Foucault completing the top 10. Whereas Annemarie Worst, she withdrew, she crashed on the stairs, she was too late to unclip, and that looked like a pretty bad crash, and we know that she's had knee injuries before, so let's hope that everything with regards to her knee will be fine. Is there anybody out of the top 10 you would like to pick out and discuss, Issam?
I think you said it with the 6th place of Ribeiro coming through the field. I think that was definitely a very good performance from her. A bit of a shame that it had to go that way, because I think that wasn't it for that bad first lap and having to get through the field. Who knows? Maybe a top 5 was maybe on the card. So, that was a bit of a shame to see, and I think for her it was a very good result. And yeah, I think that in the end it's a bit of a shame that she wasn't able to get that top 5. But yeah, other than that, I would say that Van der Heijden definitely was looking for a podium spot in the beginning of the race, and then just didn't really have it to back up and try to go with Cassasola, and Cassasola was just too strong, I would say. And the rest, in my opinion, came kind of on their place. I would say one surprise, in my opinion, was Sanne Kant, that she was able to get an 8th place there. That was a positive result for her, I would say. For the rest, I think no big surprises, and the camera work wasn't that great to really understand what was going on, apart from the top 3.
Well, since you've covered it, I think we can move to the Dutch word of this week.
Ze draaien rechtsop. Kan Thibaut Nys uit dat wiel komen. Dus op de strip. Hier weg van zijn lijn een beetje af. Maar Nys gaat erover en wint.
Patat.
The Dutch word of this week is miserie, which is a pure Flemish cyclocross word. It's probably the most purest form of a cyclocross word. What is miserie, and why is it the word of this week?
Literally, you could maybe say the misery, the unfortunate thing that could happen to a rider. I would say that if a rider has been called in the same sentence with miserie, then you have serious issues. But it just means that a certain rider is in hardship. It could be a puncture, a crash, having some mechanical issue, not having the legs anymore, and being completely out of energy. Actually all the bad things that could happen to a rider, you could kind of put that under the word miserie. And it's a word, like you said, if the Flemish have the chance to use it, they will certainly do during a broadcast, or just at the side of the racing, the fans that are there watching it as well. They will shout it as well if they see something happening like that. So yeah, it's but it was a word, I would say, that this weekend definitely could have been used, because there was some crashes left and right, some bad first laps, some bad openings. There was a lot of action in one day, and I don't know how you think about it, but I would say that this, all the categories packed up in one day and just a full day of broadcasting. I mean, we missed out on the juniors in terms of broadcasting with the Belgian broadcaster, but from the women under 23, it was, in my opinion, I think it was quite enjoyable to see all those categories after each other.
Well, it was, but I still prefer it over 2 days. It's a bit more relaxed, gives us a bit more time to talk about everything, to do the posts, etc. And viewing-wise, it's just better, but I didn't mind it as a one-off. But as you said, miserie is a word that can be used a lot, also when it's almost a crash. So let me do my best Paul Herreigers impression. Ai, 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 miserie, miserie, ai, 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 oh, dat loopt maar net goed af. something like that is what you will hear when, like at the downhill of the Koppelberg, at the end, that muddy section there, Misery was definitely used a lot. On the super deeply rutted sections, dat levert echt miserie op. It causes problems. It's used when things go wrong and when things almost go wrong. But a group of riders who certainly didn't have too much misery today were the women U23. They raced when conditions were still dry. They were lapping around 21-22 kilometers per hour. But the race was pretty predictable. Schreiber led for the most of the first part of the race. Backstedt then took over, attacked and dropped Schreiber. Backstedt took the title ahead of Schreiber. The third place went to Zemanova. She was initially behind Bentveld, but Bentveld dropped into her hands and Zemanova dropped her going into the final lap. This was the second and final correct podium prediction from our preview podcast, but it was also a pretty predictable race, especially because the conditions were also as we predicted. But Backstedt taking the win is hardly a surprise to anybody. It was a good course for her. She is by far, or well, by a margin, the best U23 rider at the moment, and she never seems to have an issue with championships. So, yeah, it was not surprising, but still a very deserved European title in what might have been the most straightforward race of the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for the result that we have seen with the women under 23, I think, we kind of expected it to go that way. Backstedt was definitely the main favorite, and Schreiber was definitely the one that we expected to go fast in the first two laps. And I think, I don't really understand that strategy in a way. Obviously, I understand that when you have a fast start, you want to keep that lead for a moment. But even if your competitors are also going to play in on the fact that they already know that you are going to be leading out so fast, and that they just have to sit behind and wait for the moment where the pace will drop, and then they also kind of know that is the moment for them to strike. I don't know if then you are at the going into a race with the right strategy, especially in the championship, but we kind of expected that as well, unfortunately, and I think it fell kind of on the place. I mean, I expected Bentveld to end up in such a scenario, but then to be able to hold on to third place. But Zemanova also just had a very, very strong race, and it was maybe for Bentveld just hanging on a little bit too long with the front two. And eventually, getting caught by Zemanova and not really having an answer. And I think that also has to do with the fact that Zemanova was also very strong for third place.
I think today it was more a matter of Backstedt accelerating when she attacked rather than Schreiber blowing up. Schreiber put in a blistering first lap and then set into a relatively consistent pace. Backstedt managed to put in another blistering lap, which was actually faster than the first lap when she attacked, and then lapped a few seconds a lap faster than Schreiber. So Schreiber definitely felt a bit more in control today, also not that desperate to get first into the field. And I do think that might have cost Bentveld the third place. I think Zemanova would have eventually caught up to her anyways, but Bentveld definitely looked to have gone a bit too deep trying to follow them, and then really lost a chunk of time to Zemanova, who was a bit better. I think the rest of the top 10 doesn't bring us too many surprises. Molengraaf in 5th ahead of Honesty, Van Sinai, Brouwers, Ladikova and Borghesi. The men's U23 race was one that was unfortunately decided by a lot of bad luck. As they went away, it started to rain very hard. Laurijsen, who was at the front of the race in one of the front positions, crashed. That led to a leading duo of Verstringen and Michels. Verstringen made a mistake around the barrier section, allowing Michels to ride away. Verstringen came back. We were set for a last lap battle, but then Verstringen punctured, so we had game over. It was a victory for Jente Michels ahead of Verstringen. The third place went to Rémi Lelandais, which was slightly surprising. He took that place from a big group which caught up to Bart Huijps, who was initially running in third place. I don't think we can say that much about the first and second place, except that Michels said the season would be a disappointment if he didn't take a jersey, and he finally, I wouldn't say finally, he's a 30 U23. He takes his jersey.
Yeah, and I think that he, put down a realistic goal, because he was definitely he was definitely one of the guys to beat today for the under 23. So I guess that was a strong race from his side, and Emil Verstringen had a lot of unfortunate. He was very unlucky, I would say, and I think that definitely helped Michels as well. But Michels also gave a very strong impression on certain hills and looked very good, himself. So I definitely don't think that he got a misfortune that Emil Verstringen had to endure in this race. But it was more just that Michels, from the moment that he got the chance to be at the front, he took that opportunity and put everyone under pressure and just was the strongest in the end and deservedly won that race. Bit of a shame for Verstringen, but it's not the end of the world because, he already experienced becoming a European champion, so I don't think that it is a big loss for him, but I would still definitely understand the disappointment. We could maybe say a bit of a surprising third place with Remy Lalande.
Yeah, I hadn't put him in my pre-race notes. He did very well. He was riding very confident in these changing conditions. He was on the Lagrange Cross team last year, which then went bankrupt just before this team. Found some team willing to support him on a local level. Good to see him do well, and I hope this might boost him in finding a new team, because he did beat Bart Huijs, a rider who races for the Baloise Trek Lions. It's definitely something that's worth keeping an eye on. It was a good result by him, has to be said. He is a final year U23, which is definitely a help. But on the other hand, the riders behind him, Huijs, Van der Putten and Lilo, are also a final year U23. We saw a couple of other riders further down the top 10. Pomenel 7th, Lequet 8th, Laurijsen 9th and Bicio 10th. We would just like to finish the section on the U23 by just praising Leo Bicio. Very good result for the junior world champion. I will give you the podiums of the other races that there were, the junior men and junior women. Albin Sparvel took the men junior title by beating Takat Zombor, the Hungarian bomber, in a sprint. The third place there was for Jules Simon. The French really had a good weekend, taking 4 medals. It was nice to see Hungary in the top 5 with 2 riders, as Barnabas Vos ended 5th. And then we have the women junior, where the top favorite Celicia Géry took the title ahead of Kat Ferguson and Victoria Gladonova. There it was nice to see Slovakia end in the top 10 with 2 riders. Issam, we've covered it here for the European Championships in Pontchâteau. Thank you very much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me, and it was a great championship. So I think that it was surprising results that we have expected. So it had it all. It was great to watch, and really enjoyed the not the weekend, but I guess the Sunday, and it was great to watch all the races come through on the screen.
It was also nice to have a free Saturday for once. I could do some stuff like cooking and packing my bag for Finland. It was nice overall, and I will now spend the rest of this car journey editing and rushing this out before I enter my 32-hour ferry trip to Finland. So thanks everyone for listening. We will be back this week with probably some sort of podcast, either at the Pan American Championships or the preview for the Dendermonde World Cup, or both. We still need to decide. It's my week of uni. I'm in Finland, so we will see. And else, of course, we will be back next week covering Super Prestige in New and the World Cup in Dendermonde. Thanks everyone for listening, and goodbye.